You make a bunch of noise out here, so they have peace and quiet in here. Because there's no better sound than the squeak-free guarantee from Advantech Subflooring and Advantech Subfloor Adhesive.
Hello, UnBuild It podcast. Maybe I should be saying howdy because we're in Texas. And we got a special treat for you today because we're in the Build Show studios. As you know, we're now part of the Build Show network. We come under that umbrella, our podcast. So we went out there and got one of the coolest dudes from the Risinger Build, Daniel Glauser.
How's it going?
Daniel,
welcome. Great to have you here, Daniel.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks, guys.
You know, Daniel's doing his own project, which we're going to get into, but, you know, we'll let him talk about his background. But, you know, Daniel's as sharp as it gets in building. So his responsibilities there entail, you know, overseeing all of the project managers and basically, you know, dealing with all of the things that kind of come to the top that maybe they can't handle personally, or you just provide some assistance and you use your experience and knowledge to help them out. So tell us a little bit about yourself, buddy.
Okay, yeah. So before I was at Risinger, I ran my own construction company for about 10 years. Started off doing very small kitchens, bathrooms, stuff like that, self-performing a lot of that work. And then kind of grew from there to doing whole house renovations on the luxury market and some new construction as well. And then, yeah, Matt tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, can I have you?" And I said, "Sure." It kind of worked out timing-wise with it was actually right when the pandemic hit and we're transitioning some things. But I've been here at Risinger now for 3 years, and yeah, as Steve said, I kind of oversee all of the projects, all the project managers, making sure that things are moving smoothly the way they should. If there are any technical issues or things that need to be worked out, I kind of step in and help guide them through that process and making sure that everything's moving smoothly.
It sounds like you probably did the most work or know the best, Jake Bruton, who's missing. So we kicked him out because he knows you.
Why do we have to mention him? He's not here.
He's missing.
Yeah.
Good. Can we keep him there?
We'd have to ask Daniel about that.
We'll put a picture of him on like the milk carton. Have you seen Jake? And then we'll stop there.
So we were particularly interested in the project. You're working on your own house.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about, you know, we've been to the site. It's an incredible project, but tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
Yeah, sure. So we bought a house about 4 years ago that was being sold as a tear down, which is what I like to buy. This is maybe the third or fourth time that I've done this, but I know it had a solid foundation. It was on a beautiful lot. It had a lot of potential. So we've sort of designed, initially the idea was just, design it so that it functioned the way we needed it to. We needed another bathroom, a little more space, things like that. And then also update the sort of the bones, the outside, the skin of the house. Mm-hmm. And then through that process and my sort of traditional building techniques, realized that, hey, maybe this could be a passive house project. And so looked into that a little bit. I'm getting quite a bit of guidance. My guru leading me through this is Trey Farmer and his team at Forgecraft Architecture. And so that's what we're doing. It's going to be a passive house certified project, we have basically had the challenge of working with an existing structure that's elevated, so it's on a pier and beam. Mm-hmm. So we've got to air seal all around the house, which is quite challenging. But we've kind of come up with a good plan using our zip system sheathing as our main barrier, and just trying to pay close attention to the details there.
So you said that you bought it as a tear down, but you ultimately didn't tear it down, correct?
That's exactly right. We found out, so I did an inspection on initially. It was like, where I live, traditionally, builders come in and they just raise the houses and start over. There was enough there that I felt like it should be kept. Also, it's, a lot cheaper to do. At least it was in this instance. So yeah, we kept the house.
It's interesting. I'm a building consultant, and I have on 3 occasions gotten clients to say, yeah, what we really need to know is, knowing what you do about building performances, when do you decide to tear something down rather than try to, retrofit it? And it's a really interesting, tough question.
Yeah.
So there was enough there with this.
There was enough there, and I'll be honest, one of the kind of most important factors from a budget standpoint, which I know a lot of people are going to think I'm crazy, but we are living there during the renovation, right? So that saves us quite a bit of money, not having to pay rent somewhere else. And of course, if we would have torn the house down, we couldn't do that. And
we have to tell a little bit how crazy ass this is, because you've got 3 kids and 2 dogs and a couple of cats.
That's right.
They're all part of the occupancy.
Yeah, it's a full house, and it has made sort of the sequencing of the project quite challenging, but nothing that we couldn't overcome, and my family is on board with it for the most part, some days more so than others. But we've made it through the toughest stage where we've completed all the framing, and the house is fairly livable.
It's interesting when you talk to people about, when is it worth saving the house? It's not just that it be structurally sound. To me, what's interesting is the room layouts. Yeah, right? Because if you have a house that's just like, oh man, to reconfigure this, it's just going to be, I might as well knock it down. So clearly, in addition to this being structurally worthy of retrofit, you had pretty good layout of spaces?
We did. So we hired an architecture firm, Design Trait, who helped us actually design the house. And it appeared to me to be quite challenging, but I knew that there were professionals that could do it. And sure enough, they did an amazing job. We created hallways where there weren't before by kind of switching the ratio or the orientation of some bedrooms without really affecting the footprint. And it's, we're on a fairly decent sized lot, so we expanded in 3 different directions, which helped out quite a bit with that as well.
And we have to say that there is a view, stunning review and that's always challenging, because if it's going to make it tough from an energy perspective to preserve that view. Is that the case with this project?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that is, especially when you're reaching for these passive house goals, and you're working with an existing house. You don't get to decide the orientation. You don't get to decide the views. So our best view does face kind of southwest, which is a challenge. We wanted to obviously maintain that view, which we've done. We oriented the windows to sort of picture frame the view as opposed to just a big glass wall. But in addition to that, we're going to have some exterior shading with a nice wraparound porch that will have a roof above it, which will help a lot with that.
So the program you're building under is the Passive House Core Revive, right, which has a performance path as well as a prescriptive path possibility?
That's right. We're doing the performance path. As we kind of talked about, the layout of my house and the shape of it didn't allow us to quite meet the metrics for compaction and window to wall ratio and some things like that. So we're doing the performance path, which required full energy modeling, which we've done on the house.
And when you say your family's totally on board, did everybody sit down and say, Dad's going to talk to us about Core Revive today?
Yes. I mean, the amount of questions they have about Passive House, you wouldn't believe. No, they could care less about that.
That's Dad's thing.
But they do appreciate having lots of insulation in the house, for sure.
Yeah. So when you look at the Core Revive standards, and are you going to get certified under this program? Or is just follow what they do and then be done with it? Or are you actually going to get certified?
Yeah, we are actually trying to attain certification. We're going through the whole process. I know a lot of people ask why do that. It's not necessarily, if you're going to build the house anyway. But I think it's important to, I'm sort of in a position where I can get that information out there, and I speak to a lot of people. So I think it's important for me to show an example that, makes people more aware of what passive house is.
It's a leadership role.
Yeah, and what those standards are, and the benefits of it. And it brings in a lot more questions. If I wasn't doing it, I think it would be harder to have those conversations.
So, Steve, you've done some passive house level
We did
retrofits.
the first retrofit in the country under Retrofit.
And you've been to Daniel's
I've been
house.
to Daniel's house.
So what kind of jumps out to you as,
I mean, the challenge is, being on piers is certainly a heightened challenge over the one that we did.
Because you got to worry about
We
all
had one
six
that had a
sides.
basement, right? So it's it's all six sides, but where that bottom side kind of comes to the support, right? It's a steel beam under the floor. Like there's some challenges to air sealing that and getting it right, which I have full faith in Daniel solving for that. It's just it just makes it harder. It's a little bit more of a building science experiment.
Yeah, there's definitely spots where, the plane of my air barrier is broken by these structural elements. And so each one of those has to be considered and detailed individually. And, we'll see what happens.
With it being on piers, is there like a mechanical chase area that you pull all the utilities down through?
There will be. So actually, we're working again with existing stuff. So there's the plumbing that's under there. Following slope like it should, breaks that plane in a lot of spots. So part of what I'm going to be doing is reworking all of that wastewater plumbing so that anywhere that it breaks the plane is maybe in a vertical, or if I can group those together into one spot. You cluster them together, exactly. So yeah, that has to be considered, absolutely. And minimizing those penetrations, of course, is important.
There was a new passive house project in southern Vermont where I was living at the time, and they did a passive house on piers, and they brought all their mechanicals down through one column.
Yeah.
And when they did the first blower door test, it's like they're looking for where it's leaking, and one of the major thermal bridges, air leaks, was that column.
Yeah.
Which is kind of good in a way, because that's one location, and that was one of the big violations. You were shaking your head at me when you talked about the...
Because I have an image of that house in my head.
Oh, yeah, Steve. Yeah. So, just full disclosure.
Performance over aesthetics was exponential.
The couple, really smart, not architects, they did the design. And it is a challenging house to look at from the outside. But they love it, and from the interior, it's got quite striking aesthetics. But from the outside, maybe not so much.
I have to see that one.
It's okay, but it does perform extremely well.
Yeah. So one of the conversations we had on the job site was about air tightness, and it was interesting to hear how you plan to go after, because you've got on piers, you've got a lot of geometric complexity. So how are you going to go after the air tightness?
Yeah, so we've basically wrapping the entire house with zip system sheathing. We are taping, for the most part, taping all of the seams. There are a few spots, again, because of that complexity, where we're going to be using liquid flash to kind of make that continuous air barrier. And then the roof deck itself, there are obviously new parts, that is zip. The older parts, we have put on a fully adhered ice and water shield that will be our barrier in those locations. And
it's a flush box design, right? So you've stripped it down to do the Monopoly House approach.
That's right. So on the new construction portions of the project, we didn't put any rafters. On the old part, we cut all of those off. So it's all 2x4 trusses. And so we've cut those off, modified those rafter tails that come off, and then wrapped our zip or whatever we have at the top. We've wrapped that up and over, so that's continuous. And then we'll be adding on some sort of after rafter tails to give a look so that we do have overhangs to protect our walls.
We just did a podcast recently on modeling. What type of modeling was involved or is involved with this?
So I'm definitely not the expert on this, but so we used the Woofy model, and we've been designing using all of that to make our decisions as far as how much insulation goes where. And go ahead.
So is your passive house compliance sort of the person you have to work through part of the architectural firm, or is it a separate consultant?
Part of the architectural firm. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
That's pretty common.
Yeah.
Right, to have that approach.
Yeah.
When we were at your house yesterday, one of the things you mentioned is multiple blower door tests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're definitely planning to really. We know that it's going to be a challenge to meet those goals, and just can't wait till the end.
Did you do a baseline on the house?
I did. So before we did any work whatsoever, surprisingly, it came in at 6.7.
No kidding.
Yeah, which I still, and I actually.
That's actually really good.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I would have guessed it'd be like 25. Like when we go in and do remodeling, and I mean our homes. What's the vintage on this house?
It was built in 77.
Yeah, but I mean we've gone in and done like post-war 50s houses that are like 20, 25.
Yeah. Yeah, I recalculated my volume several times to be sure that I was right, and so anyway, 6.7 is where it was. Yeah. So we're trying to be 10 times better than that.
Right.
So we're gonna do multiple blower door tests kind of throughout. Unless we do one and we hit the goal immediately, which is unlikely to happen. But
it was funny because Daniel showed a lot of guts to have the three of us show up at the end of the day to the project. And, you mentioned that you're managing this project like 30 minutes in the morning and then 45 minutes at the end of the day because you have a day job.
Right.
But that speaks a lot of credit going to you've got really good folks working on this building.
Yes, absolutely. So we're definitely, it's something that here at Risinger that we really pride ourselves on is, we have built these relationships in my case and in Risinger's case over decade.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have found the people that do really good work, are very trustworthy, but also understand our methods and why we do things the way we. So, I could in the morning say, kind of have a meeting with the team, the framing team, and say this is what we're trying to work on today, troubleshoot as best we can what we might run into, and then of course I'm always available by phone, so if they had questions we could walk through things. And then at the end of the day when I come back, if I see something, I'm like, hey guys, let's not do it this way. So there was some amount of rework that had to happen because of that situation. Mm-hmm. But really, the guys have done a fantastic job, and I feel confident that we're going to get there.
I have a question for you. When it comes to the details, who's driving that boat? Are you asking the architect, hey, this is what I think we should do, can you draw this up? Or are they saying, are you going to them and say, hey, I need a detail for where this steel beam hits the floor, and then they come back with a detail that you comment on?
Quite honestly, it's just me.
Is it?
Yeah, it's just me looking at it, coming up with what I think is the best way, and then I go to them and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing, and they've got some ideas. One of the things that we talked about on site yesterday was how to treat the gap in between the window frame and the rough opening. Mm-hmm. I'm still not fully resolved on what we're going to do there because there's a lot of different ways to go about doing that. But that definitely, I reach out when I need help, but for the most part, it's me making the decisions.
Gotcha.
We didn't talk at all about mechanical systems, so I didn't ask you on the site, so have at it because I don't know what you're doing.
Okay, so definitely that is going to be a huge challenge. I'm working with the guys at Energy Vanguard.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so
that's Allison Bale's crew?
Yep, exactly.
From Atlanta, Georgia?
Yeah, exactly. And they've been great. So we've got a design. I actually just got the duct layout this morning. And so we've kind of had some meetings back and forth over Zoom. They've done all of my calculations for me and figured everything out. The trick, it being a renovation, is how do you get to the places you need to get to?
Yeah.
And so, I've had my mechanical contractor on site. We've walked through, brainstormed on how we were going to do that, and then he has been in the meetings with me with Energy Vanguard, and made suggestions, and we've kind of tossed ideas back and forth on the best way to go about it. But yeah, they're the ones that have been doing all my design work. So
it sounds as though it's not mini splits, that there'll be a central system with ducting.
That's right. There'll be two systems. It's a 2-story house. There'll be one system. So it's a 2-story house, but really the second story only occupies maybe a third of the total footprint. Yeah. So we do have attic space above a good portion of the downstairs, so that we'll have a traditional Mitsubishi in there. And the duct layout is fairly straightforward. The floor joists are 2x12s. So we have to kind of shoot the gap and run through some of those areas to get from one side of the house to the other. Mm-hmm. So during framing, there was one spot where we have this big LVL beam that goes across. So we had to get a little bit creative on how we handled that. And so we're actually in that position. The LVL beam is above the floor joist, hidden in the wall upstairs, and all of those floor joists are hanging from it. So we could still get through where we needed to get from one side of the house.
So was that a structural accommodation after the fact? Because you...
Yes.
Yeah. That's...
So it was while I was on site, I was like, this is not going to work, because it literally cut off a whole side of the house, and there was no other way to get across there. So we've had to overcome those types of challenges.
And in terms of the ventilation system, the mechanical ventilation system for the whole house, is that separate ducted system that you're going to use?
It is. So we haven't fully decided yet, but I think we're going to go with the Brown system, and that will be separate from everything else.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit about what happens if you're sort of at the end of your air sealing and you haven't come down to the figure. We were describing, well, that might be an application for aero barrier.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like in your hip pocket, right?
It's there. Yeah, it's absolutely there. I mean, one of the challenges that we talked about was, because we are living there, that's one challenge. We've got lots of stuff.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, some of the walls, the exterior walls, still have drywall on them because we didn't touch everything. And so we kind of talked about, what that means for the aero barrier and where it would seal any penetrations that there might be.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course the struggle is that if your primary air control layer is at the exterior with the zip, and what aero barrier is going to do is fill gaps from the inside, well, you've got a planar difference there. So it'd be interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah. Yeah, any way they could... we could depressurize the house and they could spray it from the outside.
It's funny that you should say that, because one of their new ventures is to, in homes with attics, to go up and take out all the insulation, put spray heads in the attic, depressurize the house from below.
Interesting.
So if a very high percentage of your air leaks is on the top lid, this would be a way to, pull the sealant down, but the spray heads are actually outside the building.
Yeah.
I guess what we could do is cloak your building.
Yeah. We could just put a liquid membrane over the entire thing.
Tell your neighbors you're doing a termite treatment or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess finally, does the Core Revive program require that you do like a year's worth of energy consumption to prove that you're getting to the levels or not?
I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that question either. That is a great question. I know that they are very specific on all of the load calculations and all of the equipment that we're putting in there, but I don't know how that translates to actual usage.
We were talking about when you get the building enclosure and the mechanical systems performing well, and then these other loads that are related to occupant number and behavior, like plug load lighting, appliances, and domestic hot water. Shouldn't you be given some allowance for the fact that, hey, this is 5 of us living here rather than 2?
Yeah.
And I don't think programs give allowance for that, but when you get the loads down that low, the occupant stuff becomes super important.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll see how that works.
Yeah, I always talk about, the other thing I talk about too is, we are 98-degree heaters walking around in the house, and that can be a challenge sometimes, especially when you have kids that are running around putting off a lot of heat.
Well, and I think the thing you do is just blame it on the pets.
There you go.
Well, we look forward to hearing how this project goes over time. And
yeah, I'd love to have you guys back.
We're going to keep you under the microscope, Daniel.
For sure, absolutely, absolutely.
Steve, you want to wrap us up for it?
Yeah. So there you have it. Passive house retrofit situation with just a really great builder that, I really commend you, just like I said, taking a leadership role. You're down here in Texas. Austin has a pretty decent history on energy performance and, green building.
First green building program in the United States.
Right. So they're here, but it's still interesting to me that, there's a lot of programs that, architects and builders probably just don't even have a clue exist,
Right.
And for you to bring that to the forefront, and also, are you one of the, I'll call it an instigator to Austin BS and Beer?
Yeah, I'm definitely a member there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, bringing that as part of the leadership role, so that like you're trying to get everybody to come to the table with a discussion, but then you're bringing your own personal project to that discussion to talk about, which is extremely highly commendable in the industry. So, and
to invite with a smile on your face the three of us to your house, that's pretty laudable too.
Listen, I think I should get applauded for pretty extreme restraint yesterday. It was late in the day. I was a little tired, but I was like, okay, we won't talk about that today.
I can't say I wasn't a little bit nervous.
But yeah, it was good. It was
thanks
really
a ton,
good.
Daniel.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
So, if you're looking for us, you can find us. We're on the Build Show Network now. We're still in all of the different audio channels and on our YouTube channel, so you can find us in all the places that you have found us to date, but we're adding to that. And now you can find us. All of our podcasts will get cataloged on the Build Show Network. Jake and I are already contributors there. We brought along Pete, and we're adding the podcast there now too. So, until next time, Peter Yost,
So long.
Daniel.
All right, take care.
All righty. See you later.